Morning, everyone. Taiwan donated 500,000 masks to Canada, and Andrew Scheer was there to receive them. There were pictures of Andrew Scheer standing kind of awkwardly around, and nobody from the from the part of the government that is leading the government, just Andrew Scheer, right, from the official opposition. And here's Trudeau answering a question, or not answering a question, on China. And here's Pundit Class, and he says, reporter, is your government standing up to China, or is it backing away from China? Trudeau does not answer the question, ignores the follow-up, walks away. Okay. Yeah, he really does all of those things. Here we go.
Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. The former Prime Minister of Australia, Malcolm Turnbull, says China is a bully, and that the way for Canada to deal with China is to stand up for it instead of backing down. Is your government standing up to China, or is it backing away from China?
My responsibility as Prime Minister is to make sure that we're providing for Canadians and keeping Canadians safe. That's the job people expect me to do, and that is exactly what I'm doing. We're going to ensure that Canadians have the equipment, the supplies, the support they need to make it through this pandemic. Of course, at the same time, we will be asking difficult questions about how we're making it through this pandemic, how this came to happen, how we can learn from this. There'll be plenty of time for questions in the months to come. My focus, rightly, is on doing everything I can to help Canadians through this.
So are you standing up to China?
Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
So are you standing up to China? Thank you very much, everyone. En français. So weird, right? I mean, not weird. Not all that weird at all. Here's another follow-up question. This was at noon yesterday. Today is the 9th. This was published at 1:20 p.m. updated. And it says, Trudeau thanks Taiwan directly for generous mask donation. Here we go. Just because it is important to see him say this. Because, you know, China's influence on the WHO and influence in Canada, blah, 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 right? Operation Sidewinder and Chinese infiltration through Huawei and through other means. Right? You're with me? Okay, here we go.
Taiwan has donated 500,000 surgical masks needed by Canadian healthcare workers on the front lines of the pandemic. Your foreign minister wouldn't thank the country by name. Will you?
I'm happy to thank Taiwan for its generous donation. It is important at this point that Canadians and all people around the world pull together to be there for each other, because this is a global challenge that is...
Rhetoric. Doesn't matter. He said Taiwan. Interesting, right? So he won't talk about standing up to China. Not going to answer that question. Is your government going to stand up to China? So you going to stand up to China, sir? Thank you very much, everyone. Right? Au revoir, tout le monde. So weird, right? And in the face of one of the biggest economic crises ever, right? Since 2008, certainly. But I mean, look at this curve, right? Like, pop. That's no good. And, well, the jobless rate doesn't have a lot to do with standing up to China at this point in time. The jobless rate has a lot to do with complete incompetence in the handling of this at the beginning of this outbreak. And, I mean, we've seen examples of places that haven't had to shut down at all. One of them is Taiwan. Why was their advice not adopted by the WHO? Oh, politics, that's why. So moving into Canadian, or more hard Canadian stuff, Financial Post is reporting Canada lost almost 2 million jobs in April. Jobless rate soars to 13%. Canada's numbers are usually around 5.5%, right? 7% is getting kind of iffy up there, and anything higher than that, you're looking at, you're looking at what we're looking at. Here it is. Canada's unemployment rate soared to 13% in April, with the country shedding roughly 2 million jobs as a result of the coronavirus-induced economic shutdown, according to the latest data from Statistics Canada. Roughly 3 million jobs have been lost over the past 2 months, the steepest consecutive monthly declines in employment ever recorded. The numbers were not as bad as economists had feared, however. Expectations were for a loss of 4 million jobs and an unemployment rate of 18%, said Reuters. And there's the unemployment rate. Right? As of the week of April 12th, the number of Canadians who were either not employed or working substantially reduced hours was 5.5 million, or more than 1/4 of February's employment level, the jobs report said. When adjusted to reflect those not technically counted as unemployed due to COVID-19 related reasons, the April unemployment rate would be 17.8%, StatsCan data showed. I scroll down. Quote, we have to go back to the Great Depression to find similar numbers, and even then the speed at which the current episode unfolded seems to have no identifiable precedent, wrote Brian DePreto, senior economist at TD Bank. So there's a lot happening very quickly in Canada, and the impact is going to be ongoing, especially if we can't get things rolling again quickly. Here's BC. BC lost nearly 400,000 jobs in March and April, the province says. This is reported May 8th, yesterday. And BC's unemployment rate rose by nearly 2/3 from March to April, Statistics Canada said Friday, with hundreds of thousands of jobs wiped out by the COVID-19 pandemic. The provincial jobless rate jumped from 7.2% to 11.5% last month, according to the latest labor force survey data. So jobs are a big indicator of the health of the economy, clearly, right? And things aren't looking so healthy. And I don't know how we right this ship without actually opening up the economy. And I've seen interviews with people who were saying that the curve of places like Sweden, who didn't close down, is similar to the curve of places like, I can't remember the countries he named, but he named a bunch of countries that did shut down, Canada included, and he said they're kind of similar. Like they have 3,000 deaths. He talked specifically about the UK, and he said Sweden's population was 50% of the UK's, and their death rate was about 10%, which is the same as the UK's. So it's interesting, right? Like there's all sorts of conflicting data, and it's hard to know what's true. It's hard to know what's accurate, and I think it's folly to demand 100% safety. I don't think you're ever safe, right? Like you could open up the economy now, be driving to work tomorrow and get hit by whatever, and then, like you didn't die of corona, but you died much sooner than you expected, right? And nobody could have seen that coming, right? So, except the statistics that say X number of people die on roadway accidents every day. So, demanding full safety before going back to work, I don't know. I don't know that that's even possible ever. I don't think it was possible before. I mean, I've seen footage of people working at McDonald's in the middle of the night, and entire gangs come in and start like full-on gang wars, just start shooting up the place. Right? Like you're at work. And is that different than COVID-19? In some ways it's really similar, right? It's totally out of that person's control, the worker behind the counter, right? They're not responsible for the actions of the people who come into the store. I mean, so how can you make people 100% safe? It's not feasible. It's not possible, and once this boogeyman, once this thing is solved, and you're going to have everybody on one side and the other, right? Have to be 100% safe. Can't send the children back, the pearl clutching for the kids. I understand that. I'm a father too. But when you have to wrap everybody in bubble wrap in order to, protect everybody, but 50,000 cancer patients are going to die, or heart patients die because of the lack of care, that needs to be factored in as well. That needs to come into the conversation, and it's not. And it's weird. Excuse me. This matters just as much as the virus. It probably matters more, right? Like that's going to impact a lot of people. That's a lot of houses. That's a lot of families. That's a lot of people that are now going to be reliant on somebody else to feed them, potentially somebody else for rent or whatever, right? If they had a job previously, they were reliant on their employer, but there were other employers. If that didn't work out, there's a system for that, right? There's no system for, please don't kick me out of my house. The government's going to pay you, I promise, at some point, right? That's not great. And landlords don't want to hear that. Moving on to housing. Housing and how much tax money goes to fixing Justin Trudeau's... Fixing's kind of... Fixing's a leading term, so forget I said fixing. Here's Ben Woodfinden. Excuse me if I've got that wrong, Ben. And he says, based on the Fife Globe reporting and this eviscerating Paul Wells column, I'm going to offer a mea culpa to Pierre Poilievre, whom I attacked for what I thought at the time was a ridiculous tweet, but in hindsight seems to have actually been onto something. And he's referring to, if Harrington Lake is everyone's house, then I'll see you all there. And here's the piece. Here's the Paul Wells piece, right? And Paul Wells is usually carrying water for Liberals, so noting that he's not happy with this spending is, notable. If Harrington Lake is everyone's house, then I'll see you all there. Paul Wells says Trudeau's behavior around the farmhouse renovation fits a pattern, believing that you deserve only the information he designs to give. So, okay, he's got 3 items here. But it seems that he said the 3rd item is from this morning's Globe and Mail, which we're going to have a look at in a minute, right? But it seems the Prime Minister's family is using a caretaker's home, renamed the farmhouse, and spiffed up to the tune of $2.5 million as an interim residence at the PM's Harrington Lake, Quebec country estate, while the main cottage, its folksy name unspecific, pauses from its $6.1 million reno because who's working these days? Gene Wolfe, the dapper and amiable National Capital Commissioner spokesman who took the Globe's questions, needed to make a few passes over the target of full disclosure before hitting it. Quote, there are no new buildings being constructed, he said. The old buildings were dismantled, much of it discarded, and huge new parts put on, some distance from the old one. Is a new house new if it has an old door? No, it's not bigger. It's so much bigger. Turns out the farmhouse, at 450 square meters. Now, if you don't buy houses or real estate, usually, unless you're building, I suppose, unless you're talking in construction, but I don't know so much about construction. But if you're talking in just real estate, if you're talking a real estate agent, you're talking square feet, not square meters, right? I don't know about the square meters with regards to construction industry. Maybe that's their jargon, but usually square feet is the measurement you would give for a house. But anyway, I digress. And it does get to that. We'll see. Anyway, turns out the farmhouse at 450 square meters is 3/4 larger than the old caretaker's house it incorporated, white blood cell-like as it lurched up the driveway to a better spot with a nicer view. I'm bad with spatial concepts, so I Googled a bit and found that 450 square meters is a little shy of 5,000 square feet. Now, I'll just kind of put it into perspective. When I was growing up, I grew up in a house. It had 2 stories, no garage. It was 1,200 square feet, 3-bedroom, 1 bathroom. At the time, we put a 2nd bathroom in the basement because you have to have a bathroom, but no powder room. And that was about 1,200 square feet. So that's, I mean, that's a modest family home. I know people now who have houses that are like 3,000 square feet up. They have the loft on top. But that's to give you some perspective on how big this 5,000 square foot house is. Anyway, back to the article, which is a 5-bedroom house, easy. In fact, the farmhouse is fully 1/5 larger than the 2017 CEHO Dream Home, which raised big lottery bucks for the Children's Home of Eastern Ontario and featured 10-foot ceilings on the main floor, a grand front entrance, a curved open staircase, a gourmet kitchen, and a luxurious master bedroom and ensuite bathroom. Okay, this is positioning here, right? Like he's replacing the farmhouse with the Dream Home. But I mean, is it a good comparison? Maybe. Back to this. They make their farmhouses big at Harrington Lake. Tonight, the government defenders are telling us, we knew this all along. It depends on how well you like to know what you know. In April, when CTV reported on more than $8 million at renos at Harrington Lake, the NCC told us it had told us all about this in 2018. Here's a note from the NCC's Wolf in 2018 that mentions a farmhouse rehabilitation project. There's a link there. Neither in that note nor in the report that references it can I find a mention of pick the farmhouse up, put bits of it down somewhere else, and expand it radically so it absolutely crushes the 2017 CHEO Dream Home project. The first mention of a substantial new construction at Harrington Lake that I found comes from a former occasional resident, Ben Harper, who's picked up much of his father's politics, but who tweeted remarks on the matter from April 17th were pretty bland. Pierre Poilievre, the conservative financial critic, followed on April 19th with a widely remarked tweet that included a photo from Apple Masks and asked, did Justin Trudeau secretly build himself a new lakeside mansion at Harrington Lake with our money? Here's the tweet from Mr. Poilievre. That's a penguin. But the blue check marks says Ottawa's verified gang get it wrong again. So here's the original tweet. Did Justin Trudeau secretly build himself a brand new lakeside mansion at Harrington Lake with our money? Here's the before. Oh, I'm right in the way. Oh, goodness. Okay, before. Try again. Oh, that was after. Before. Okay, so it's kind of like a triangle, right? And then in the middle of the triangle, in the after picture, you'll see a whole big construction. Yeah, see? Wild, right? Like that's not insignificant, right? Before, after, right? And then everybody, like, here's the get help reply. Here's Neil McDonald saying maybe have a better idea of why Poilievre dropped out of the Tory leadership race. Here's Adam Vaughan and his Millennium Falcon thing. Here's David Moore. Did Trudeau secretly build himself a brand new castle in Ottawa with our money? people, and here's a Colbert being a conspiracy theorist with duct tape, it looks like. I know it's supposed to be a tinfoil hat, but it looks like it's duct taped on. Yeah, and the tweet says, "I'm just asking questions based on pictures from the internet. Very normal stuff, all very normal." Except he was 100% right? And then at the end, it caps it off with the Globe and Mail article from May 7th, right? May 7th, 2.5 for reconstruction of guest cottage at Trudeau's Harrington Lake retreat. Weird, right? I mean, not weird, very insidious, and not very transparent from a government that was saying that they were going to be transparent. So weird. We're moving into the Globe and Mail article here. So taxpayers spend $2.5 million for reconstruction of guest cottage at Harrington Lake. I just wanted to highlight this part. Quote, the original building was dismantled with heritage components integrated into the new structure and moved to a site closer to the main cottage, Mr. Wolf said. He initially insisted that the new farmhouse, which from satellite imagery appears much larger than the ramshackle caretaker's cottage, was not a new and bigger building. Quote, there are no new buildings being constructed. NCC completed rehabilitation and relocation of the old caretaker's house. Mr. Wolf said, no, it's not bigger. I do reiterate that it is inappropriate for me to comment on images that are not our own or that cannot be validated by the NCC. That's a sneaky way. I don't know what that picture is. Here's an approved image that I can confirm is the new caretaker college, but I don't know what image that is. Right? Like that's the level of that's where we're at with regards to fake news, right? You could be shown the same picture and have that kind of reaction. Anyway, or a picture of exactly the same location and one's a verified picture and one's a not verified picture, and there you go. Unbelievable. Anyway, back to this. However, Mr. Wolf later confirmed that the farmhouse had been indeed significantly expanded to meet what he calls new building code standards. The floor area of the original caretaker's house was 260 square meters. The new building has significantly more floor space. It will now be able to accommodate the various needs of visitors, guests, and staff at official functions carried out by the head of the Government of Canada, he said. To achieve these goals, especially as they relate to universal accessibility, the design of the constructed house requires a floor surface of 450 square meters that still features many of the heritage character elements from the original 1850s cottage. Mr. Wolf said the overall bill for rehabilitation of the Harrington Lake residence and for all its buildings has been estimated to cost $17.8 million of capital investment. So far, $8.6 million has been committed to the effort. Okay. Imagine that you had a piece of property and you had like a 2-story shed on the property and you wanted to use that to like, you know, as the location for a home or something like that. If you brought like a construction crew there and you said, I want to have a 5,000 square foot house right there where that shed is, what do you think that person would say to you? Do you think that they would say that's a rebuild? Well, we'll use the same foundation and then we'll expand it and they would say rip it down and we're going to start over, right? Yeah. So I think this rebuild and rehabilitation of the old caretaker's house was some maybe political tap dancing by our friend, Mr. Butts. Last story for this morning, and I know I'm at 18 minutes, but man, Doug Ford said, don't go to your cottage, and he went to the cottage. Isn't he a hypocrite? The whole thing's good, so we'll watch it.
Criticism towards me is fair. Everyone has their opinions, and I'll tell you what happened, Cynthia. On Sunday morning of Easter, my team told me I got the morning off, and it was the first time I got off in, I don't know, 2 months. And it was weighing on me because a couple years ago, we had burst pipes, made a terrible mess, thousands of dollars of damage. And that night, you know, I was thinking about it. I woke up early in the morning, 5:30, and then I just got ready and hopped in the pickup truck myself at 6:30 in the morning. I drove up there and checked out, you know, make sure everything was okay, and it was. I literally hopped back in my truck and drove right back. I was back by noon, and that's what happened. I probably won't be going up there for another couple months. We won't have time, but that's what happened. So,
I mean, there were news articles that tried to make hay out of this. There are Reddit threads and Twitter threads and all sorts of other stuff that is, you know, clickbait for low information people who are only interested in one aspect of the story. Did he go up to his cottage? Yes, then he's a hypocrite. Insurance usually requires you to check your pipes, to check your plumbing. He's the premier of the province. So he went up on Easter morning to do that. I think that's acceptable, right? You got to live. It's weird. It's an interesting situation to live through, where the facts really don't matter. It just matters if the press agrees with you, if you can find a legitimate looking website or study backed up by a think tank that will give you what you want. And it happens on both sides, right? It happens everywhere. There are think tanks that look at certain things in one way and they include certain metrics, and then left-wing think tanks look at the same thing another way and they don't include certain metrics, so they come up with wildly different conclusions, right? Tax base is 40%, tax base is 80%, tax base is 90%, right? So what's true, right? It depends on who you believe, and it's hard to discern. And situations like this, where it's not hard to discern, are purposely made difficult and muddy by a press that's less than honest and a politicized situation that is more interested in getting a quick win, making the premier look bad or whatever, right? Than it is over reporting honestly, right? And this is the opposite. This is reporting less transparency to make the prime minister look good, or at least look like he's not using this to enrich himself. And furthermore, I wouldn't even have a problem with this if it was framed in a way that, like we're going to be using this as not a White House, but like a meeting house for international diplomacy and blah, blah, blah. Because you need to have money spent on things like that. You need to have money spent on an official residence. You need to have a place like the White House or a place that's got meeting rooms and can be secure. You need to have your head of state secure. Harper or Trudeau, I don't like either of them. Both sold us out in different ways. But regardless of that, regardless of the selling us out, I wish they hadn't sold us out to China and other special interests. It's interesting that China is a special interest. It's like, you want Nokia? Okay, we'll just close it down and send you all the tech for free. How's that Huawei coming? Anyway, regardless, you should spend money on your heads of state when they're behaving in the best interest of the state. And you need places not necessarily like this. But the criticisms here are the same. The transparency I wish that there isn't in our government, and the playing of the press to make a conclusion of the public more likely, right? Like, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. Frustrating to live through, frustrating to even argue through. You can't settle on a truth to base an argument on, right? If you believe X is true, well, you believe the wrong source. So obviously you're a right-wing Nazi sympathizer or whatever, right? It's weird. It's a weird thing to live through. So I know people criticize me for saying weird too much, but it is. It's a strange thing to live through. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful